It's a people, it's a community, it's a life, it's a heart, it's a spirit.
Parents of gay children say, I want my son, my gay son, to have the same opportunity to come to me and say, hey, Dad, I'm getting married, as my non-gay son or my non-gay daughter.
The heck would you want a picture of a tattoo of $1,000 on your penis for?
You might just need to satisfy yourself sexually alone at that point.
Do I regret it? Not one bit. Did I think that I would actually take it the next step and do it again?
And what goes into their life, how they handle it. There are 12 houses, and each one of those houses has a particular function.
Look into yourself, think about it, and just be whoever it is that speaks to you.
Hello and welcome to Talking About. I am very, very happy to have a special guest today, Charles Casillo. Welcome.
Thank you.
Actor, model, writer.
Writer nowadays.
Writer nowadays.
Yeah, everything else comes pretty much in the past, but it's led me to where I am now, so yeah.
Okay, and your latest book is The Fame Game?
The Fame Game.
Okay, and which is what we're primarily going to be talking about today.
And I'm happy to do that.
Okay, and okay, just an overview of what the book's all about.
Well, it is about the nature of fame today. In a broad context, it's about, you know, when I was younger, I was a little bit of a misfit. And I found a refuge in studying talent. I've always been, if I do have any talent myself, it's that I've been able to recognize talent. Like, I love great literature and good movies and wonderful movie stars and art. And so I've grown up appreciating that. And then somewhere in my adolescence, I started to notice that people were being appreciated for different things. It wasn't so much anymore accomplishment or wanting to create a great work or be really wonderful. It was more about having a gimmick, getting your name out there. Fame had a totally different meaning that it had in previous generations. Fame for the sake of fame, something that Andy Warhol had predicted. And at first I was really curious about that. And then as I got older, I was fascinated with it, with daytime television and people getting their moment in the spotlight for doing something despicable or doing something outrageous or doing something that wasn't really noteworthy, but yet here they were being given the spotlight. And then when I started writing the book, when it was sort of at its peak, I was very fascinated with it, the new form of celebrity.
Celebrity for the sake of being celebrity?
Yeah, I mean, talent had completely left the picture, and now it was more about marketing and becoming a brand. And it didn't really matter what you had done to become branded, but you were marketers, the people that were marketing you, the PR people, became more important than the actual product. So that's when I started writing the book. And then since it came out in hardback and now in paperback, I've been talking about it for a year, and I think that it's gone from the curiosity and the fascination to disgust. I think it's real disgusting now, the things that we see daily on TV, you know, on the internet. But I do think, on an optimistic note, that it's going to swing back. The pendulum will swing back. People will get tired of it, just as I'm getting tired of it.
Right.
And it will go more to talent. You know, we'll start recognizing that again and appreciating that again.
I hope so.
Well, I look forward to it. I think that our generation will be looked back upon 40 years from now as being pretty ludicrous, and will be made fun of for, you know, our Britney Spears and our Paris Hiltons, and our fascination with them, and our elevating them to the status of giving them more and more money and more worship. That, you asked me what the book was about. That's the underlying theme, but yet, you know, I don't preach about that. It's not philosophical. It's a fun book. It's a show business glitz kind of novel, and I used as a basis for that classic glitz novels, Harold Robbins and Jackie Collins, and, you know, who doesn't love The Valley of the Dolls? So Jacqueline Suzanne. So I use that kind of a format to tell my story, but yet I'm more literary than just a glitz writer. So although I wrote to entertain this specific book, I tried to be entertaining. I also have my bitter, sardonic commentary, which you have to read between the lines to get. Otherwise, you could just enjoy it for the sex.
Well, from concepts to print, what's the process like for you specifically with this book? I mean, okay, just the whole concept of fame, as we just mentioned. How did you come to want to translate that into this story?
Well, it was part of my life. I grew up in New York City, and earlier on, I started out as a model, and then I went into acting, and then that morphed into entertainment journalism and writing. So, and with that, I moved that to LA. So I had a feel of those worlds, the entertainment worlds in New York and LA, the most competitive worlds in the world. And I saw firsthand this sudden need to be in the spotlight, to not feel any kind of self-worth unless you're reading about it in the paper. Like, people who are writing books or making music don't really feel they've accomplished anything until they see some kind of confirmation in the media. And also, that was part of it in setting my imagination on fire. But the other part was the incredible backstabbing I saw in it, the need, the ambition. We're all ambitious, let's face it. We all want our work to be recognized, and we all want to be talked about, and we all want to be analyzed. But these people who had so little going for them, except maybe the idea that they wanted to be famous, becoming so ambitious and lethally ambitious, and backstabbing and clawing, and everyone is thrown into the same pot. You know, we have very talented people, and then we have people who aren't so talented, then we have mediocre people, and then we have people who have no business calling themselves an actor at all. And you're all thrown into the same pot, and everyone's waving their arms saying, look at me, look at me. I have something to offer. I want to show you what I can do. And you know, that's what I used in my book. I mean, I followed the careers of 3 or 4 different people, the narcissists, the talented people, the sleazy agents, and how we're all kind of nudging each other to get our attention, to get our work seen, or to get our product seen. Sometimes it's not even work, sometimes it's just product. Okay.
And, well, just a little bit about the 2 central characters. You want to just kind of paint their picture in a little bit more detail?
Sure. The narrator of the book, his name is Mario, and he's a male prostitute, which is sort of, if you want to go deep, I mean, it's a metaphor of, you know, selling yourself. He actually does have some talent. He wants to be a writer. He's really genuine. He doesn't like what he has to do. He does male prostitution because he comes from a background of not being very educated and not having anyone who could make a phone call on his behalf. So he's surviving on the only way he knows how, which is through his body and through his desirability, and trying to make people notice his writing ability. He's the narrator of the book. And at a crucial point in his development where he's you know, almost too old, you know, because we're so youth-oriented, he's almost becoming too old to make it. He meets this young, beautiful model named Mickey Britton, who also is from the inner city and also has a lot of potential. And but because of where she comes from, and because she doesn't have the connections and the nepotism to get noticed, she's often finds herself being used sexually by guys who promise her the moon and then discard her. She's kind of like a modern-day Marilyn Monroe, very vulnerable. But the difference between her and Marilyn is that she learns to use her vulnerability and wield it as a weapon, and she turns the tables and she starts using men. So these 2 forces, Mario and Mickey, meet, and they start kind of using each other. Then there's a 3rd character that's introduced to the mix who has absolutely no talent, no charisma, nothing going for her, but her father is one of the most successful film directors in the world, and she has all the connections and power, and she longs, it's funny because she longs to be what they are, which is talented and ambitious and really have something to offer. And they long to be what she is, which is famous and be able to pick up the phone and get anyone on the other line. So they all want something from each other, and they start using each other at this period in their life where it's a turning point. And I think that the glimmer of faint in their future, the glimmer of fame, the faint hope of fame in their future brings out the worst in them. And they all start showing their claws, and they start cozying up to each other, befriending each other, coming on sexually to each other to advance to the next level, which I think makes for a page turner.
Well, it does form an interesting triangle. Are any of the characters based on some real world people that you've met? Even loosely? I mean, you mentioned Marilyn. Yeah, Marilyn-esque. Are there aspects of people who have been in and out of your life that have taken shape on the page?
Yeah, I think they're all based on real people that I've met. I call those seeds, you know, someone that sparks an interest in me, either the way they look or maybe just one line that they say to me, or something that they do. We may spend an evening together talking, and something in their character is a seed that's planted, and then I have to build on that, maybe make that a composite, you know, bring in other people to flesh them out, or maybe just let my imagination build on them. But the final process with all my characters is that I have to put myself in there. And I've heard other fiction writers say that that's a mistake, that when you're creating a character fictitiously, it should just be a fictitious character. For me personally, I'm not a trained writer. I just am an instinctual writer. I feel, and maybe it's partially because of my acting background, I like to get in the skin of the character, no matter how horrible they are, what terrible things they're doing. I like to put myself in their place and the background that I created for them, try to feel what made them get to where they are and why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. Because if I don't believe them, if I don't believe what they're doing, I don't think that a reader will believe it. So as a writer, my main objective is to entertain, and I think that an important part in writing a book that's entertaining is to get the reader totally absorbed in the story and in the characters, and I think that they have to believe them in order to do that. So first I have to believe them in creating them.
So, well, in creating, is of the triad that we had mentioned, is there one character in particular that speaks more in your voice than the others?
Well, I think that because the first person character, who is the one male of the trio, people want to say that he's me. I think that I have an equal amount of myself invested in all of the characters, even the lesser ones. But you know, I don't. You know, if I let people read into it what they want. I mean, if they want to think that I'm Mario, then that's okay. I'm flattered, actually, that they think that you know, that they believe him so much that they want to believe that that has to be a real character. But they are real. They're all real to me. I mean, my mentor and good friend Jon Griffith, who is a famous novelist, told me that the biggest literary liar is the autobiographer, because he's trying to make the reader believe that something that really happened, but really in reality it's only the way that he remembers it. Whereas a fiction writer is much more truthful, because he's saying, this never really happened, but I'm going to work like hell to make you believe it. So I think that if someone thinks that my fictitious characters have a basis of truth, then my mission has been accomplished.
Okay. So, well, I mean, in the evolution of your career, it took you from New York to LA and back again. What made you transition from one career to the next?
The need to make money. I think that
always comes back to that.
Well, you know, I mean, you can only be a struggling artist and be adorable for so long. Once you start to get out of your early 20s, it's not so cute to be a struggling artist anymore, and you really have to start sowing your oats. I mean, originally, I was using modeling as a means to get into acting. Acting never really took off for me. You know, it's very competitive, as all artistic fields are. But you know, I just wasn't getting, I wasn't even getting decent auditions, nevertheless getting decent roles. So I think that if you're a creative person, if you're born with a certain amount of sensitivity and creativity, if it's not being released in one area, it's going to come out somewhere else. Because otherwise you're walking around like you're on fire. You know, it's not being released. So I think that if I wasn't acting, I might be painting. And if I wasn't painting, I might be directing. For me, when I started writing, it took off right away. People started recognizing me in that field. So it seemed logical to follow up on that and go in that direction. So from entertainment journalist, it went to writing novels, and then the novels took off, and I just kept letting it go in that direction.
Okay, so the Fame Game is book number
4.
Book number 4. And you started with?
My first book was about Marilyn Monroe.
Okay, which happened to have sitting right here.
Oh, what a coincidence. The Marilyn Diaries, which Marilyn is a muse to me. I've always been very inspired by her. I saw a photograph of her when I was very young, maybe 10 or 11 years old. And I had never heard the name before, or maybe I had heard the name, but I didn't know that much about her. But there was something in looking at her that fascinated me and compelled me to know more about her. Through the years, I started watching the films and looking at the photographs and reading the biographies about her. So when I was going to do my first book, I thought it was only natural that I should write about her. But I was going to do a biography, and I realized, I started rereading the biographies, and I realized she had only lived for 36 years, and by that point she had been dead for so many years that there wasn't really that much new that I could add to her biography except my point of view, which at that stage of my career people weren't that interested in anyway. So I started to think of different ways that I could recreate her. And I started thinking, well, Marilyn is a fantasy figure to everyone, so maybe I could recreate her in the way that she exists for me, you know, my personal opinion of her. So I started thinking of ways that I could do that originally, and I thought, well, the diary format is so immediate. You know, to read someone's diary, what's more delicious to get a hold of it. And there was always a rumor that Marilyn had kept a diary before she died in the last few years of her life, and then it disappeared immediately after her death. So I had always been very curious about that. So I said, well, I'm going to recreate her diary. So I'm going to take the facts of her life, which we all know and are all very well documented, but we don't know what she was thinking during those moments, those crucial moments in her life. So I'm going to recreate those moments in her own thought process as filtered through me.
Okay.
And so
somewhat voyeuristic.
Yeah, definitely.
So you know, looking into the mind, you know, of a larger-than-life persona.
Right. And bringing it to a human level, because I think that a lot of people always judged Marilyn through her films or through her image, and they think of her as a very fluffy, dizzy, delicious-looking blonde, and they don't realize that that was a very canny creation of Marilyn's. That Marilyn creating that blonde bombshell sex symbol image was very much in the way that Charlie Chaplin created The Little Tramp, or Sylvester Stallone created Rambo. Had very little to do with who they were as people, but it had to do with something that the public could latch onto and get to know their name and bring them the fame that they wanted.
Back to
Which
fame.
brings us back to fame and how different it was. I mean, how canny and smart and intelligent and intellectual you really had to be in those days to carve a niche for yourself. You didn't just have to flash, you know, the photographers with no underwear on in order to get 3 days of coverage on CNN. You know, you really had to do something. You had to make a movie.
And it's amazing that CNN spends 3 days on the lack of underwear.
Well, you know, the public, it's partially the media's fault, but the public has a lot to do with it too, because the public wants it, so we have to feed the public what they're interested in. If they were interested in the war, you know, we'd have more coverage of that, or the debates, you know. But if they want to read about a custody battle or a rumored pregnancy, we're going to give them that, because it all comes down to money and what commercial people are going to pay for.
Right. So always back to the almighty dollar.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
But what has the critical reaction been to your work, specifically the Fame Game?
It has been good. It's particularly in the United Kingdom, where it was considered a masterpiece. In New York, in the U.S., it's been mixed. But I don't trust critics at all. I mean, I don't have a lot of respect for them unless they like what I do. Otherwise, I think they're pretty stupid. But, you know, who are critics except for, you know, idiots with opinions? Myself included, I write a lot of book reviews, but I might like a book review, but I might like a book, but it might not be to your taste, or her taste, or his taste. You know, I mean, it's just a matter of opinion.
Right.
And so, you know.
Yeah, if you can find someone in that position whose views seem to sync up with yours, then that might be someone whose opinion you might validate. But
right.
You can ask a buddy the same question.
Right. I think that a lot of times criticism, in which I read, has a lot more to say about the critic than it does the work that they're reviewing. I think that, again, going back to fame today, everyone wants to be famous and everyone wants to be in the spotlight. And for a lot of critics, it's hard for them to have to put the spotlight off of themselves onto another work. So they feel that by being very demeaning to the work and making some kind of wisecracks about it and trying to be witty in a negative way, that they're putting the spotlight off of the work and back onto them. But I say that says more about them. It's like a person who leaves a tip for somebody says more about the person who's leaving the tip than the person who's receiving the tip.
Okay, yeah, it's something I hadn't looked at that perspective all that much, so that's an interesting view.
But if you ask me tomorrow, I might change that view. So it's just, it stands for nothing except for the moment.
Well, that's all we have.
Exactly.
So, okay, and in addition to the Fame Game and Maryland Diaries, you've done some short fiction also?
I have a book of short stories. It's called Boys Lost and Found, which is a collection of short works that I've done over the past 10 years that was collected. I was really happy to have it because there's not much of a market for short stories anymore. So a small publisher picked that up, and I'm just glad it's out there for people who want it. And also the biography of Jon Griffith, who was an early influence on me with his masterpiece, I think, City of Night, which came out in 1963. It was a groundbreaker. He had been a male prostitute, and he wrote about very seedy situations and characters, and wrote about it in a very lyrical, poetic way. So it had an impact on me in the sense that I found that art can be found anywhere, you know. It doesn't matter where inspiration comes from. It can come from the back streets or a garbage pail or the subway at 3 a.m., wherever inspiration comes from, you can turn that into art.
So what's your current inspiration?
Well, right now I'm being inspired by you. I'm being sitting here, being interviewed by you. I mean, you know, anything. I mean, inspiration sometimes is subconscious. You don't know where it's going to come from. I mean, a lot of times being trapped on the subway at 3 a.m. after a cocktail party, looking across at a woman who might be coming home from a date that didn't go well, and she has tears in her eyes. I might make up in my imagination a whole backstory of her life.
I do that so often. I see somebody with some character in their face, and I just imagine what brought them to that point.
Right.
And it's just it's a fascinating way to spend time on the subway, especially.
Right. Well, the subway is a perfect example for finding inspiration, and I'll look forward to reading your book.
Well, do you have another book in the works?
I just started, actually. I did just start. I mean, I have to take a little distance. When I do a big work, I have to take a little distance from it. So, yes, I am working on something now. It's really mostly in the note-taking stages. Okay. But I'm reading a lot of 1940s crime novels and the film noirs of the 1940s and 50s, like Laura and In a Lonely Place. And I'm writing that kind of a crime book in a very contemporary setting. Okay. But that's where my inspiration is coming from right now.
Okay, so it's still sort of embryonic, so I can't really get into too much detail.
I started actually the writing of it, but yeah, it'll change a lot by the time I'm complete.
I mean, usually from your initial concept to final product, does the concept turn itself around a lot as it evolves in your own mind?
On a book, yeah, because it's you know, a year or two. You know, short story pretty much is what I set out to do. Okay. And you know, I could hold it in my arms for a month and really nurture my initial inspiration. A book, because I'm constantly evolving, a book is constantly evolving.
Okay.
And the characters are evolving and the situations that they're in, especially if it's contemporary. You know, I find that the latest news blast will have some impact on the chapter that I'm working on at the moment. So yeah, it'll change a lot over the next few months while I'm working on it.
Okay. And where can people find out more about you, other than this show?
Well, they can Google me.
Okay.
I love to be Googled.
I'm not going there.
Under my name, Charles Casillo. And I also have a MySpace page, which has lots of information and blogs. And yeah, so just a regular internet search for my name,
Okay,
Charles
so
Casillo.
myspace.com/Charles Casillo?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the web address, but if they just go on MySpace and then type in my name on search, a few things will come up.
Okay.
I hope.
And, okay, 5 years from now, where do you want to be?
Well, I would like to have to sell myself less. I think that part of being a writer, part of the frustration of being a writer is that with each new work, it's almost like the previous work has been wiped away, unless you're like Stephen King or Anne Rice. Even with articles, when I write a piece for the LA Times or the New York Times, it could be a front page piece, but for the next time I'm pitching a story or an article, it's like I'm starting all over again. I'm selling myself. I'm selling each new idea for a novel. I'm selling each new work. I'm pitching it. I'm coming up with a hook. I'm trying to convince somebody that it's a worthwhile project. So I'd like to reach, in 5 years or less, I'd like to reach a plateau where the name Charles Casillo will sell itself, and I don't have to prove myself anymore.
Okay. So again, the most recent being The Fame Game.
The Fame Game.
You can find it online at your local library. Yeah.
Barnes & Noble, Borders, online. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that? Well, you can edit that later judiciously, whatever you have to say.
That's okay. No,
Bookstores.
it's out there. It's out there.
It's out there.
But I do want to thank you.
And I want to thank you because it was a pleasure to be here.
Okay. And again, look for you on MySpace. Our website here is www.talkingabout.info. We're also on MySpace. We have about 60 shows online, more all the time. I'm Jon Griffith, Charles Casillo. Thank you. See you next time.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
That was pretty quick.
Yeah, it did.
We're just going to do the...